They whispered that she was born to be forgotten, the invisible Halloway sister, destined to fade into the wallpaper while her family shined. But history is written by the victors, and in London's cutthroat marriage market of 1842, victory doesn't belong to the kind. It belongs to the ruthless. Everyone mocked Beatrice Halloway for her silence, mistaking her patience for weakness. They didn't know that a storm was coming, a storm named Silas Vance, the Duke of Blackwood. He didn't just want to marry her. He looked at how the world treated her, and he vowed to burn that world to the ground. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how the ugly duckling didn't just become a swan. She became the owner of the lake. The year was 1842, and the London fog clung to the cobblestones of Mayfair like a wet shroud. Inside the Halloway residence, however, the air was stiflingly hot, perfumed with lavender water and the acrid scent of desperation. Beatrice Halloway, 23 years old and already branded a spinster by the cruel arithmetic of society, knelt on the hard oak floor of the drawing room. Her knees ached. Her fingers were raw. She was pinning the hem of a silk gown that cost more than the annual wages of their entire kitchen staff. "Higher, Beatrice! Good heavens, are you blind as well as plain?" The voice belonged to Lavinia, her younger sister, 19, blonde, and possessing the kind of beauty that made men lose their wits and women lose their tempers. Lavinia stood on a stool, looking down at Beatrice with a sneer that distorted her porcelain features. "I am doing my best, Lavinia," Beatrice said, her voice steady. It was a practiced steadiness. She had learned long ago that tears only fed the sharks. "Well, your best is pathetic," snapped Cecily, the youngest Halloway, lounging on a velvet chaise. "Mother says if Beatrice doesn't finish the alterations by 6, she shouldn't be allowed to attend the ball at all. Not that it matters. Who would dance with the furniture?" Beatrice bit the inside of her cheek, tasting copper. Her father, Baron Halloway, had passed away 3 years prior, leaving the estate in debt and his eldest daughter at the mercy of his second wife, Lady Augusta. Augusta was a woman of sharp elbows and sharper ambition. She had quickly realized that Beatrice, with her dark chestnut hair and serious grey eyes, was not marketable in the way her own daughters were. Beatrice was the workhorse, the accountant, the seamstress. "That is quite enough," Lady Augusta swept into the room, the rustle of her taffeta signalling a shift in the atmosphere. She didn't look at Beatrice. She looked at the dress. "Lavinia, hold still. Beatrice, finish the thread. You will attend tonight, but only because we need someone to manage the carriage schedules and ensure the girls' dance cards are handled properly. You are not to dance. We cannot afford to waste a potential suitor's time on a charity case." "Yes, stepmother," Beatrice whispered, snapping the thread with her teeth. She stood up, her joints popping audibly in the silence. Lavinia giggled. That night, the ballroom of the Earl of Chesterfield was a kaleidoscope of wealth. Chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen tears, casting light on diamonds, rubies, and the sweaty desperation of mothers hawking their daughters. Beatrice stood near a potted palm in the corner, wearing a dress of dull grey muslin. It was an old gown, reworked 3 times. She held Lavinia's fan and Cecily's smelling salts. She was invisible, a ghost in grey. She watched as Lord Frederick, a man she had once thought kind, a man she had once walked with in the park before her father died, approached Lavinia. He bowed low, ignoring Beatrice entirely, though he stood less than 3 feet from her. "Lady Lavinia," Frederick crooned, "you outshine the stars." "Oh, Frederick, you flatterer," Lavinia laughed, tossing a triumphant look toward the corner. "Do fetch me some punch. My sister would get it. But she's rather stuck to the wall, isn't she? Frederick glanced at Beatrice. For a second, his eyes held a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the desire to please the golden girl. He laughed, a cold, hollow sound. Indeed. Best leave the wallflowers to the wall. Beatrice felt a crack in her chest. It wasn't heartbreak. She was too tired for heartbreak. It was the cracking of her dignity. She gripped the fan so hard the ivory slats groaned. She wanted to scream. She wanted to overturn the punch bowl. But she did nothing. She simply lowered her head, staring at her scuffed satin slippers, wishing the floor would open up and swallow her whole. She didn't know it yet, but the floor wasn't going to open. But the doors were. At 10 o'clock, the music stopped. It didn't fade out, it was cut off, as if the orchestra had been strangled. A hush rolled over the ballroom, starting from the grand entrance and rippling outward like a wave of frost. The chatter died. The laughter ceased. The master of ceremonies slammed his staff against the floor, his voice trembling slightly. His Grace, Silas Vance, the Duke of Blackwood. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Silas Vance. The name was a curse and a prayer in London society. He was 32, richer than the Queen, and possessed a reputation that was entirely pitch black. Rumours swirled around him like smoke. They said he had built his fortune on ruthless trade deals in the East Indies. They said he had destroyed 3 separate earldoms simply because they insulted his horse. They said he had no heart, only a ledger of debts he intended to collect. He had not attended a London season in 5 years. He stepped through the archway, and the crowd parted instinctively, like the Red Sea fearing Moses. Silas was a towering figure, broad-shouldered and imposing in a suit of stark black superfine wool. Unlike the fops in the room with their colourful waistcoats and powdered wigs, Silas wore no jewellery, no lace. He didn't need to. His power was in his presence. His face was all hard planes and sharp angles, with a scar running through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a duel he had undeniably won. His eyes were the most terrifying part. They were dark, intelligent, and utterly bored. He walked into the room, removing his white gloves with slow, deliberate movements. "He's looking for a wife," Lady Augusta whispered hissingly to Lavinia and Cecily. "Straighten your spines, pinch your cheeks. The rumours say he needs an heir to secure the Blackwood line. If one of you catches his eye, we are made for life. We will own London." Lavinia puffed out her chest. Cecily batted her eyelashes. Silas Vance moved through the crowd like a wolf stalking a herd of sheep. Mothers pushed their daughters into his path. He ignored them. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He simply walked, his gaze sweeping over the powdered faces, the forced smiles, the desperate displays of cleavage. He looked at the women of the ton as if they were livestock at an auction, and poor livestock at that. He stopped near the centre of the room. Lord Frederick, trying to seize the moment, stepped forward. "Your Grace, welcome back to London. I am Lord Frederick. Perhaps you remember—" Silas didn't even turn his head. He simply held up a hand, silencing the man, and continued walking. Frederick turned a deep shade of beet red, humiliated. Beatrice, from her corner, watched this display with a strange fascination. She had never seen anyone treat the high society with such open disdain. It was liberating. She shifted slightly, trying to ease the ache in her feet. As she did, she accidentally bumped the small table beside her. A crystal glass of untouched champagne wobbled and fell. Crash! The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. Every head turned. Lady Augusta's eyes bulged with rage. Lavinia looked horrified to be associated with the noise. Beatrice froze. She dropped to her knees instantly, her hand shaking as she reached for the shards of glass. I am so sorry," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "I will clean it." "You clumsy fool," Lady Augusta hissed, stepping forward, forgetting herself in her anger. She raised her hand, not to strike, but to gesture violently. "Get up! You are ruining the night! Get out of sight!" Beatrice cut her finger on a shard. A drop of bright red blood welled up, staining the grey muslin of her dress. Tears stung her eyes, not from the pain, but from the sheer, crushing humiliation. Hundreds of eyes were watching the invisible Halloway, picking up trash on her knees. Then she saw a pair of boots, black leather, polished to a mirror shine. They stopped inches from her hand. The silence in the room changed. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was terrified. Beatrice slowly lifted her head. She looked up past the black trousers, the black coat, the severe cravat, all the way up to the face of Silas Vance. The Duke of Blackwood was looking down at her. He wasn't looking at her with disgust. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch in her throat. He looked at the blood on her finger. He looked at the grey dress. He looked at her stepmother, who was frozen with her hand half raised. Then he looked back at Beatrice. For the first time since entering the room, the boredom left his eyes. It was replaced by something much more dangerous. Recognition. "Leave it," Silas said. His voice was a low baritone that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Beatrice blinked. "Your Grace?" I said, "Leave the glass." Silas Vance crouched down. The entire ballroom gasped. The Duke of Blackwood, the most powerful man in England, was kneeling on the floor of a ballroom. He reached out and took Beatrice's hand. His grip was warm, rough, and shockingly gentle. He pulled a pristine white linen handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it around her bleeding finger. "A Halloway, I presume?" he asked softly, his eyes locked on hers. "Beatrice," she whispered. "Beatrice Halloway." "Beatrice," he tested the name, as if tasting a fine wine. "Tell me, Beatrice, why is a daughter of a baron cleaning the floor while her sisters stand there watching?" He didn't whisper this. He said it loud enough for the first 3 rows of onlookers to hear. Lady Augusta stepped forward, her face pale. "Your Grace, she prefers to be helpful. She is clumsy. Silas stood up, pulling Beatrice up with him. He didn't let go of her hand. He turned his gaze to Augusta. It was a look that could have frozen a volcano. "I did not ask you," Silas said coldly. "I asked her." He looked back at Beatrice. "Well, do you prefer the floor, Beatrice?" Beatrice looked at her stepmother, whose eyes were wide with warning. She looked at Lavinia, who was seething with jealousy. She looked at the crowd that had mocked her for years. Then she looked at the Duke. In his dark eyes, she saw a strange reflection of her own anger. She saw an offer to burn it all down. "No, Your Grace," Beatrice said, her voice gaining a sudden, surprising strength. "I do not prefer the floor, but I am rarely given a choice." Silas's lips quirked into a ghost of a smile. It was a terrifying smile. "Tonight," Silas announced, his voice ringing through the hall, "you have a choice." He turned to the orchestra leader. "A waltz. Now." "But Your Grace," the conductor stammered, "Miss Halloway does not have a dance card." "I am the Duke of Blackwood," Silas said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "I am the dance card." He pulled Beatrice into the center of the floor. The grey dress looked like a rag against his fine black suit. She stumbled. I don't know the steps well," she panicked. "I haven't danced in years." Silas placed a hand on her waist. The heat of it seared through the cheap fabric. "Follow me," he said, "and look at no one else. Let them stare. By tomorrow, they will be too afraid to speak your name without trembling." The music swelled, and as the Duke swept the invisible spinster into a scandalous, swirling waltz, Beatrice Halloway realized two things. First, her life as a wallflower was over. Second, she was dancing with the devil, and heaven help her, she didn't want to let go. The sun rose over London the next morning with a cheerful indifference that Beatrice found personally insulting. Inside the Halloway dining room, the atmosphere was toxic. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Lady Augusta sat at the head of the table, aggressively buttering a piece of toast as if she were trying to stab it to death. Lavinia was weeping into a lace handkerchief, dry, theatrical sobs that were meant to garner sympathy. Cecily was angrily stabbing a sausage. Beatrice sat at the far end of the table, her plate empty. She hadn't been offered breakfast, and she knew better than to ask. "A mockery," Augusta finally spat, the words exploding from her like shrapnel. She slammed the butter knife down. "That is the only explanation. The Duke is a sadist. Everyone knows this. He picked the lamest horse in the stable simply to show the world he could make it trot." Beatrice flinched, looking down at her hands. The bandage Silas had tied around her finger was still there, hidden beneath the table. She hadn't taken it off. The linen was finer than any dress she owned. "He humiliated us," Lavinia wailed, peeking over her handkerchief to check her reflection in the silver teapot. "He danced with her. With the spinster. I had Lord Frederick eating out of my hand, and then the Duke swept in and turned the entire ballroom into a circus. Now everyone is talking about Beatrice. They are laughing at us, Mother. They think we are a joke." "They are not laughing at you," Beatrice said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken all morning. "The Duke was kind." Augusta laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Kind?" Silas Vance doesn't know the meaning of the word. He is a predator, Beatrice. Do not mistake his cruelty for affection. He picked you up like a stray dog to annoy the purebreds. By noon, he will have forgotten your name, and you will be left here with nothing but a stained reputation and a head full of delusions. Beatrice felt the familiar weight of shame settling on her shoulders. Perhaps they were right. Why would a duke, a man who looked like a fallen angel and possessed the wealth of a small nation, look twice at her? It must have been a game. Just then, the heavy brass knocker on the front door slammed against the wood. It echoed through the house like a gavel. "Who could that be at this ungodly hour?" Augusta snapped. "If it is the debt collectors again, tell them I am indisposed." The butler, an elderly man named Higgins who had a soft spot for Beatrice, shuffled to the door. A moment later, he returned. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "My lady," Higgins stammered. "It is a representative from Blackwood House." The room went dead silent. Lavinia stopped crying instantly. Augusta straightened her spine so fast it cracked. "Show him in! Immediately!" Augusta hissed, smoothing her hair. "Lavinia, pinch your cheeks! He has come to apologize. He has realized his mistake and sent someone to treat with the proper Miss Halloway." A man walked in. He was not a servant. He was dressed in a suit of charcoal grey, carrying a leather satchel and a cane topped with silver. He wore spectacles and an expression of severe professionalism. "Lady Augusta Halloway," the man said, bowing slightly. "I am Archibald Thorn, solicitor to His Grace, the Duke of Blackwood." "Mr. Thorn," Augusta purred, putting on her most charming smile, the one she usually reserved for creditors she was trying to swindle. "To what do we owe the honor? Did the Duke wish to convey his regrets regarding the confusion last night? Mr. Thorn didn't smile. He stepped forward, placing a large rectangular box wrapped in black velvet on the dining table. His Grace has no regrets, madam. He has sent this package. He instructed me to ensure it was delivered into the hands of its rightful owner immediately. Lavinia practically leaped from her chair. Oh, how thoughtful. She reached for the velvet box, her greedy fingers trembling. He must have sent jewels to apologize for ignoring me. How romantic. Mr. Thorn's cane came down on the table with a sharp crack, missing Lavinia's fingers by an inch. Lavinia shrieked and jumped back. "Do not touch that," Thorn said, his voice like ice. "The item is addressed to Miss Beatrice Halloway." The heir left the room. "Beatrice?" Augusta whispered, her face turning a mottled shade of purple. "There must be a mistake. Beatrice is the domestic help, essentially. Why would the Duke send her a gift?" Thorn ignored her. He turned to Beatrice, who had stood up, clutching the back of her chair for support. His expression softened just a fraction. "Miss Halloway," Thorn said gently, "His Grace noted that you ruined your dress last night due to an unfortunate accident. He requested that you accept this replacement for the upcoming season." Beatrice walked forward slowly, her legs feeling like lead. She reached out and lifted the heavy velvet lid. Inside, nestling in white silk, was not just a dress. It was a weapon. It was a gown of deep, midnight blue silk, the color of the sky just after a storm. It was embroidered with silver thread that looked like constellations. But it wasn't just the dress. Lying on top of the bodice was a necklace. Not a simple trinket, but a heavy choker of diamonds and sapphires, with a central stone the size of a robin's egg. Attached to the jewels was a card, written in a bold, slashing hand. Beatrice picked it up. She read it aloud, her voice trembling. "To the woman who bleeds in silence while others scream for attention. Grey does not suit a queen. Wear blue. I will call on you at 2:00. Be ready. SV." Augusta snatched the card from Beatrice's hand, reading it furiously. Her hands shook. This is improper," Augusta screeched. "He cannot court you. You are 23. You have no dowry. You have the personality of a wet rag. I forbid it. I will send it back." She reached for the diamonds. "I wouldn't do that, Lady Augusta," Mr. Thorn interrupted, his voice dropping an octave. "The diamonds are registered property of the Blackwood estate. If you touch them, I will have the constables here within the hour to arrest you for theft." His Grace was quite specific. "No one touches Miss Beatrice's property, or there will be war." Thorn adjusted his glasses, looking at the terrified women with disdain. "Good day, ladies. Miss Halloway, the Duke hates punctuality almost as much as he hates lateness. I suggest you be ready at 2. As the solicitor left, leaving the Halloway women in a stunned tableau, Beatrice touched the cold sapphires. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. She felt dangerous. At 2:00 precisely, a carriage arrived. It wasn't just a carriage. It was a phaeton drawn by 4 black stallions, their coats gleaming like oil. The Blackwood crest, a wolf rampant holding a sword, was emblazoned in gold on the door. Beatrice stood in the foyer. She was wearing the midnight blue dress. It fit her as if she had been born in it. The dark color made her skin look like cream and turned her grey eyes into storms. She had swept her hair up, revealing the sapphire choker at her throat. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. The mouse was gone. Lady Augusta was pacing the hallway like a caged tiger. "You will not go alone with him. It is scandalous. I will accompany you as chaperone. Lavinia will come, too." "The Duke invited me, stepmother," Beatrice said, surprising herself with her own coolness. "You are a fool," Augusta hissed, grabbing Beatrice's arm. Her nails dug into the silk. "Do you think he wants to marry you? He wants to bed you, ruin you, and leave you in the gutter. And when he does, don't come crawling back to this house. You will be dead to us." The door opened. Silas Vance stood there. He was wearing a riding coat of dark green velvet, his boots dusted with the street. He looked even larger in the confines of the Holloway hallway. He took in the scene instantly, Augusta's claw-like grip on Beatrice's arm, the fear in Beatrice's eyes. "Let go." The two words were spoken softly, but they carried the weight of a falling guillotine. Augusta released Beatrice, as if she had been burned. "Your Grace, we were just discussing propriety. Surely you don't intend to take my stepdaughter out unchaperoned?" Silas stepped inside. He didn't look at Augusta. He looked at Beatrice. His eyes swept over the blue dress, and a flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. "You look adequate," he drawled, though his eyes said breathtaking. He finally turned to Augusta. "Madam, I have purchased the mortgage of this property from the bank this morning." Augusta turned pale. "Excuse me? The debts your late husband left, the loans you took out to fund Lavinia's dresses, the gambling markers. I bought them all at 9 a.m., Silas said, checking his pocket watch. "Technically, you are standing in my hallway. If you wish to continue living here, you will allow Beatrice to do exactly as she pleases. If she wants a chaperone, she will ask for one. If she wants to ride with me to the edge of the world, she will do so. Do we have an understanding? Or shall I have your trunks packed?" Augusta's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She slumped against the wall, defeated. The power dynamic had shifted so violently the air seemed to crackle. "Shall we?" Silas offered his arm to Beatrice. Beatrice took it. She felt an electric shock travel up her arm. She let him lead her out of the house, past the gaping neighbors, and into the carriage. As the horses pulled away, the silence inside the plush interior was heavy. Beatrice sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap. "Why?" she asked finally. She refused to look at him. "Why are you doing this? Buying my house, humiliating my family, sending me jewels worth more than my life?" Silas sat opposite her, watching her with that intense, unreadable gaze. "Do you think I am playing a game, Beatrice?" "Yes," she snapped, turning to face him. "Everyone knows the Duke of Blackwood is bored. I am just the novelty of the week, the ugly duckling you want to paint gold." Silas leaned forward. The carriage hit a bump, and his knee brushed hers. He didn't pull back. "You have a short memory, Beatrice Holloway." "What do you mean?" 4 years ago, Silas said, his voice dropping into a storytelling cadence. November. It was pouring rain. A carriage had thrown a wheel on Fleet Street. A muddy, disgusting day. Beatrice frowned, searching her memory. I remember a wheel breaking once." "Your stepmother was screaming," Silas continued. "She was worried about the mud ruining her boots. But there was a footman, a young boy, really. He had broken his ankle in the accident. There was no room inside the carriage for him, because Lavinia's hat boxes were taking up the seat." Beatrice's eyes widened. She remembered. "Augusta wanted to leave the boy on the street, to wait for a cart," Silas said quietly. "But you refused. You, a baron's daughter, got out of the carriage. You walked 2 miles in the freezing rain, ruining your only good coat so the boy could sit inside and be taken to a doctor." Beatrice blushed. He was in pain. It was the only right thing to do. "I was there," Silas said. "You were?" "I was not the Duke then," Silas said, a shadow passing over his face. "I was the second son, the black sheep. I was standing under the awning of a bookshop, watching the world go by. feeling sorry for myself because my father had cut off my allowance. I was invisible, much like you. And then I saw you. He reached out and took her hand. He turned it over, tracing the lines of her palm with his thumb. I saw a girl in a grey dress step into the mud without hesitation to save a servant, while the rest of London walked by. I saw you shivering, your hair plastered to your face, looking like a drowned rat. Beatrice laughed, a short, breathy sound. You paint a flattering picture, Your Grace. I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, Silas said. The intensity in his voice stopped her breath. I vowed then that if I ever came into my power, I would find the girl who walked in the rain. I would make sure she never had to walk in the mud again, unless she wanted to. He squeezed her hand. I didn't choose you last night to mock you, Beatrice. I chose you because in a room full of peacocks, you were the only one with a soul, and I intend to marry you. Beatrice stared at him. The carriage rattled over the cobblestones, but her world had stopped spinning. You intend to marry me? I do, Silas said. But first, we have to deal with the rats in your house, and the wolves in mine. His expression hardened. My family. My uncles, my cousins, they want my title. They want me to marry a pliable idiot like Lavinia so they can control the estate. They will try to destroy you, Beatrice. They will dig up dirt. They will mock you. They will try to break you. He leaned in close, his dark eyes burning. Are you brave enough to be a duchess, Beatrice? Because the moment I put my ring on your finger, you become a target. But I promise you this, I will be the shield, and I will be the sword. All you have to do is say yes. Beatrice looked at the man who had just admitted to stalking her memory for 4 years. She thought of her stepmother's cruelty. She thought of the years of silence. She looked at Silas Vance, the ruthless duke, and saw the lonely man who had stood in the rain watching her. She tightened her grip on his hand. I am not afraid of wolves, Your Grace, Beatrice whispered. I have been living with them my whole life. Silas grinned. It was a true smile this time, wicked, delighted, and devastatingly handsome. Good, he said. Then let the games begin. 3 weeks had passed since the morning of Thorns, and London was vibrating with a single question. Is the Duke of Blackwood mad, or is he in love? Beatrice Halloway had become the centre of a hurricane. Every dress she wore, paid for by the Blackwood accounts, was scrutinised. Every time she stepped out of the carriage, sketch artists for the society papers were there to capture her likeness. She had gone from invisible to blindingly visible. Tonight was the apex of the season, the premiere of a new Italian opera at Her Majesty's Theatre. Beatrice sat in the private Blackwood box, the red velvet railing cool under her gloved hands. She wore a gown of emerald green velvet, cut low across the shoulders in a way that made her feel exposed, yet powerful. Around her neck lay a new necklace, emeralds this time, heavy and cold. Breathe, Silas whispered, leaning close to her ear. His breath ghosted against her neck, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the drafty theatre. If you grip the railing any tighter, you'll crush the wood. They are staring, Silas, Beatrice murmured, not moving her lips. All of them. It was true. The opera had not yet begun, and the house lights were up. Hundreds of opera glasses were trained not on the stage, but on box 4. Let them stare, Silas said, his voice bored but his eyes sharp as he scanned the crowd below. They are sheep looking at a wolf. It confuses them. The door to their box opened. Beatrice stiffened. Visitors during the prelude were rare and usually aggressive. A woman swept in. She was tall, with hair the colour of spun gold and a dress of pale pink satin that looked innocent, but cost a fortune. It was Lady Genevieve Sterling, the daughter of a marquis, and the woman everyone had assumed Silas would eventually marry. Genevieve didn't look at Silas. She looked straight at Beatrice. Her smile was as sharp as a scalpel. "Silas," Genevieve purred, finally acknowledging the Duke. "I simply had to come and see your protégé. The transformation is remarkable. One can barely tell she used to mend her own stockings." Silas's jaw tightened. He stood up, his height instantly dominating the small space. "Genevieve, you are blocking the view." "Oh, don't be cross," Genevieve laughed, stepping closer to Beatrice. She smelled of expensive rose oil and malice. "Miss Halloway, isn't it? I must applaud you. To catch the Duke of Blackwood with nothing but a sob story and a grey dress. It's inspiring for every desperate spinster in England." Beatrice felt the old shame rising, the urge to shrink, to apologize, to hide. She looked at Silas. He was ready to strike. He opened his mouth to eviscerate Genevieve. But Beatrice remembered the rain. She remembered the boy with the broken ankle. She remembered that she was the one who had walked through the mud while these people sat in dry carriages. Beatrice stood up. She wasn't as tall as Genevieve, but in that moment, she felt 10 feet high. "Lady Genevieve," Beatrice said, her voice projecting clearly, utilizing the tone she used to use when scolding the kitchen maids for stealing tartlets. "You are mistaken." Genevieve blinked, her smile faltering. "Excuse me?" "I did not catch the Duke," Beatrice said, stepping forward so that Genevieve had to take a step back. "The Duke caught me. And as for my stockings, yes, I mended them. I also managed a household on a budget that wouldn't cover the cost of your gloves, while keeping my family fed and clothed. I know the value of £1, Lady Genevieve. Do you know the value of anything other than your own reflection?" The box went silent. Even the orchestra tuning up seemed to pause. Genevieve's face turned a blotchy red. "How dare you? I am a marquis's daughter, and I am the future Duchess of Blackwood," Beatrice lied. Silas hadn't officially proposed yet, but she felt the truth of it in her bones. "And I would prefer to watch the opera without the smell of cheap rose oil. Good evening." Genevieve gasped, looking to Silas for support. Silas was leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, a look of absolute, unadulterated pride on his face. He looked like a man who had just watched his favourite horse win the derby. "You heard the lady," Silas said darkly. "Get out." Genevieve fled. Beatrice sank back into her chair, her knees suddenly trembling. I shouldn't have said that. I was rude." Silas sat beside her, taking her hand and kissing the knuckles. "Rude? Beatrice, it was magnificent. I have been trying to get rid of that woman for a decade. You did it in 2 minutes." The lights dimmed. The overture began. But Silas didn't watch the stage. He watched Beatrice, his expression shifting from amusement to something deeper, something vulnerable. "I have a question," he whispered in the dark. "Yes. If I were to ask you to marry me, right now, in front of 3,000 people, would you say yes? Or would you make me beg?" Beatrice turned to him. The shadows played across his scar. "I would say yes," she whispered. "But I might make you beg a little. Just for the drama." Silas chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple, ancient gold, set with a black diamond. "Beatrice Halloway," he whispered, "make me a better man. Marry me." "Yes," she breathed. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy. It felt like an anchor. But anchors, Beatrice would soon learn, can also drag you down. The engagement was announced the next morning. The wedding was set for a month later. It was a whirlwind of fittings, parties, and legal documents. Lady Augusta and Lavinia had been strangely quiet. Silas had kept his word. He allowed them to stay in the Halloway house, but he had cut off their access to Beatrice. They were pariahs in their own home, watching Beatrice's ascent from the windows. But a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. 2 weeks before the wedding, Beatrice was at the Halloway estate, packing the last of her personal belongings. Silas was at a meeting with the Prime Minister, something about trade tariffs. So Beatrice was alone, save for her maid. She was in her father's old study, looking for a book of poetry he used to read to her. "It's a touching scene," a voice rasped from the doorway. Beatrice turned. Lady Augusta stood there. She looked older, haggard. Her fine clothes were slightly rumpled. "Stepmother," Beatrice said, clutching the book, "I did not hear you enter." "You don't hear much, do you, Beatrice? You're too busy listening to the Duke's lies." Augusta walked into the room, closing the door behind her. "I am not interested in your poison, Augusta. I am leaving." "Leaving to marry the man who killed your father?" Beatrice froze. The room seemed to tilt. "What?" Augusta smiled. It was a smile of genuine triumph. She walked over to the desk and unlocked a drawer Beatrice had never been able to open. She pulled out a sheaf of papers, yellowed with age. "Your father didn't just die of a heart attack, Beatrice. He died of stress. He died of ruin. And do you know who ruined him?" She threw the papers at Beatrice. They scattered on the floor. Beatrice knelt, her hands shaking. She picked up a letter. It was dated 4 years ago. It was a demand for payment. The letterhead was black, with a familiar crest, the wolf rampant. "Lord Halloway, your debts are due. I have no interest in your excuses. If the funds are not transferred by the 1st of the month, I will seize your assets, your lands, and your reputation. I will leave you with nothing. Silas Vance." Beatrice read the next one. And the next. They were brutal, cold, merciless. They were letters from Silas, systematically dismantling her father's business, blocking his loans, driving him into a corner. The final letter was dated 2 days before her father died. "I have bought your final promissory note. You are finished, Halloway. Jump or I will push you." Beatrice felt bile rise in her throat. "He hunted him," Augusta whispered, standing over her. "Silas Vance wanted the land adjacent to our estate for a railway project. Your father refused to sell. So Vance destroyed him. He drove your father to the grave. And now he wants you." Augusta laughed softly. "Why? Guilt? Or is it the ultimate trophy? To own the daughter of the man he destroyed? You are sleeping with your father's executioner, Beatrice." "No," Beatrice gasped. "No, he loves me. He remembers the rain." "The rain?" Augusta scoffed. "That was 4 years ago, the same year he was destroying your father. While you were saving that footman, Silas Vance was writing letters that stopped your father's heart. Do you think a man like that knows how to love? He is a monster, Beatrice. He is simply collecting his winnings." Beatrice clutched the letters to her chest. Tears streamed down her face. It couldn't be true. But the handwriting, the signature, it was Silas. She ran. She ran out of the study, out of the house, ignoring Augusta's laughter. She ordered the carriage to Blackwood House. When she arrived, she didn't wait to be announced. She stormed past the butler, Mr. Higgins, and threw open the doors to the Duke's library. Silas was there. He was pouring a brandy. He looked up, a smile forming on his lips. "Beatrice? You're early. I thought we were dining at—" He stopped. He saw her face. He saw the papers in her hand. The smile vanished. The mask of the ruthless Duke slammed back into place. "I see," Silas said, his voice void of emotion. "You've been speaking with your stepmother." "Is it true?" Beatrice screamed, throwing the letters at him. They hit his chest and fluttered to the floor. "Did you destroy him? Did you drive my father to death?" Silas didn't flinch. He didn't look at the papers. He looked at her. "Yes." The single word shattered Beatrice's heart. "Why?" she whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was business," Silas said coldly. "And your father was a weak man, Beatrice. He gambled away your dowry. He mortgaged your future. He was going to sell you to a 70-year-old earl to cover his debts. I stopped him." "You stopped him by killing him?" "I stopped him by bankrupting him," Silas roared, slamming his glass down. "I didn't know he would die. I wanted to strip him of his power so he couldn't hurt you. I have been watching you for years, Beatrice. I destroyed his fortune so he couldn't sell you like cattle." "You lied to me," Beatrice sobbed. "You let me believe this was fate. You let me believe in the romance, but it's just guilt. You bought me. You bought my house. You bought my debts. You are just another man who thinks he owns me." "I do not own you." Silas walked around the desk, reaching for her. "Don't touch me!" Beatrice recoiled. She pulled the black diamond ring from her finger. It felt like tearing off her own skin. She threw the ring at his feet. "I would rather be the invisible spinster for the rest of my life than be the duchess of a murderer," she spat. "I am done, Silas. I am done." She turned and ran. "Beatrice!" Silas shouted. She didn't look back. She ran out of the mansion, into the London streets. It had started to rain. Silas stood in the library, the sound of the front door slamming, echoing like a gunshot. He looked down at the ring on the carpet. He had destroyed armies. He had destroyed economies. He had destroyed men. But for the first time in his life, Silas Vance realized he had destroyed the only thing that mattered. The rain in London didn't wash things clean. It only made the grime slicker. Beatrice sat in her bedroom at the Halloway estate. Her trunk was packed, not with the silk gowns or the jewels Silas had given her, but with her old grey muslin dresses. She was leaving. She had secured a position as a governess in Yorkshire. It was a hard life, a lonely life, but it was her life. Downstairs, she could hear the clinking of crystal. Lady Augusta and Lavinia were celebrating. They believed that with the engagement broken, the Duke would demand repayment of the debts, forcing Beatrice to sell herself to some other wealthy suitor to save the family. They were already planning which elderly lord to target next. Beatrice walked to the window. The glass was cold. Her heart felt like a stone in her chest, heavy, lifeless. She missed him. God help her. She missed the monster. A carriage pulled up below. It was the black phaeton. Beatrice's breath hitched. Had he come to scream at her, to demand his jewelry back? She heard the heavy front door open, followed by Augusta's shrill voice. "Mr. Thorn, where is the Duke? We have been expecting him to apologize." Beatrice opened her door and walked to the top of the stairs. Mr. Archibald Thorn stood in the foyer. He looked weary. He held a thick leather portfolio. He didn't look at Augusta. He looked up, straight at Beatrice. "His Grace is not coming, madam," Thorn said, his voice echoing in the silence. "He has left London. He is returning to Blackwood Manor in the north. He does not intend to return to society." Beatrice gripped the banister. He was gone. "Good riddance," Augusta sniffed. "Now, about the mortgage." "The mortgage is paid," Thorn interrupted. He walked up the stairs, bypassing the sputtering Augusta, until he stood before Beatrice. "Miss Halloway," Thorn said softly, "His Grace instructed me to give you this. It is the deed to this house, and the deed to the Halloway lands. They are yours, solely yours, not your stepmother's. Yours. Beatrice stared at the document. I don't understand. Why? Because he said he promised to make sure you never had to walk in the mud again, Thorn said. He adjusted his spectacles, looking uncharacteristically emotional. And he wanted you to have this. He said you didn't read far enough into your father's file. Thorn handed her a single, crumpled piece of parchment. Beatrice took it. It was a contract. It was signed by her father and the Earl of Rookwood, a man known in London for beating 2 wives to death, though the courts never convicted him. In exchange for the settlement of all gambling debts, Baron Halloway agrees to grant the hand of his eldest daughter, Beatrice, to the Earl of Rookwood. Transfer of property to occur on the 1st of November. Beatrice read the date. The 1st of November. The date her father had died. The Duke didn't destroy your father because of a land dispute, Miss Halloway, Thorn said quietly. He found out about this contract. Your father was selling you to a murderer to save his own skin. Silas went to your father and offered to pay the debt if he released you. Your father refused. He wanted the political connection to Rookwood. Thorn paused. That is when Silas destroyed him. He dismantled your father's fortune in a week to make him worthless to Rookwood. He wasn't trying to buy you, Beatrice. He was trying to save you. Beatrice felt the floor sway beneath her. All this time, he had played the villain. He had let the world think he was a ruthless tycoon. He had let her think he was a monster, all to protect her from the knowledge that her own father had traded her life for a gambling debt. He didn't tell me, she whispered, tears spilling over. Why didn't he tell me? Because he didn't want to break your heart, Thorn said. He knew you loved your father. He preferred you hate him than hate your own blood. Beatrice looked at the deed in her hand. She looked at the grey dress she was wearing. She looked down at Augusta, who was staring at the deed with greedy eyes. Give that to me, Augusta demanded, starting up the stairs. I am the matriarch of this family. Beatrice wiped her eyes. The tears were gone. In their place was fire. No, Beatrice said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the authority of a queen. She walked down the stairs, meeting Augusta halfway. This house is mine, Beatrice said, holding up the deed. The land is mine, and I am done being your servant. You ungrateful wretch! Augusta raised her hand to slap her. Beatrice caught her wrist. She squeezed hard. Pack your bags, Beatrice said coldly. You and Lavinia. You have 1 hour to leave my house. If you are not gone, I will have the constables remove you for trespassing. You can't, Lavinia shrieked from the parlour. Where will we go? I don't know, Beatrice said, releasing Augusta's arm with a shove. Perhaps you can learn to mend stockings. Beatrice turned to Mr. Thorn. How long ago did the Duke leave? An hour, Miss Halloway. He is taking the Great North Road. But with this storm... Take me to him, Beatrice commanded. Now. The chase was brutal. The storm that had threatened for days had finally broken, turning the roads into rivers of mud. The carriage rattled and shook, but Beatrice screamed at the driver to go faster. They spotted the Blackwood entourage near the outskirts of the city. A fallen tree had blocked the road. The Duke's men were trying to clear it. Silas was standing by his carriage, hatless, the rain soaking his dark hair. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who had conquered the world and found it empty. Silas! He turned. Beatrice didn't wait for her carriage to stop completely. She opened the door and jumped. She landed in the mud. The cold slime soaked her hem, but she didn't care. She scrambled up and ran toward him. Beatrice! Silas's eyes went wide. What are you doing? You'll catch your death. He ran to meet her, catching her just as she slipped. His arms went around her, hard and desperate. "You idiot!" she screamed, pounding her fists against his wet chest. "You absolute, noble, stupid idiot!" "Beatrice, I saw the contract," she sobbed, the rain mixing with her tears. "I saw what Rookwood was going to do. I saw what my father did. Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't," Silas rasped, holding her face in his hands. "I couldn't take that innocence from you. I wanted to be the only monster in your story." "You are not a monster," Beatrice said, gripping his lapels. "You are the only man who ever really saw me. You saw me in the rain 4 years ago, and you saved me. You saved me then, and you saved me now." She looked up at him, her grey eyes fierce. "You don't get to leave me, Silas Vance. You bought my debts. You bought my house. You stole my heart. You have to take responsibility for what you've done." Silas laughed. It was a wet, choked sound of disbelief and relief. "Is that a threat, Miss Halloway?" "It is a promise, Your Grace." Silas looked at her, soaked, muddy, hair wild, standing in the middle of a thunderstorm. "God, I love you," he whispered. He kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of rain and redemption. It was the end of the silence and the beginning of a roar. 6 months later. The wedding of the Duke and Duchess of Blackwood was the event of the decade, but it was not held in a stuffy London cathedral. It was held in the gardens of the Halloway estate, which was now fully renovated. Beatrice wore white, but around her neck she wore the sapphire choker Silas had given her the night she stopped being invisible. As they danced the final waltz, the guests watched in awe. They whispered about how the Duke looked at her, like she was the sun and he was the planet caught in her gravity. Lady Augusta and Lavinia were not present. Rumour had it they were living in a small cottage in Bath, where Lavinia was forced to marry a local clerk with a terrible stutter and no fortune, and Augusta had to do her own laundry. Silas spun Beatrice around, pulling her close. "Happy, my love?" he asked. Beatrice looked over his shoulder. She saw the spot where she used to sit and sew while others danced. She saw the ghost of the girl she used to be. She smiled at the ghost, and the ghost faded away. "I am not happy, Silas," she said, her eyes sparkling. He frowned. "No, no," she whispered, leaning up to kiss him. "I am triumphant." And as the music swelled, the invisible sister, now the most powerful duchess in England, kept dancing with her ruthless duke, proving once and for all that while beauty may catch the eye, it is fire that captures the soul. And so, Beatrice Halloway proved that true power doesn't come from a pretty face or a loud voice. It comes from the strength to endure the rain until the storm passes. She didn't just marry a duke, she tamed a wolf and saved herself in the process. Her stepmother and sister learned the hard way that karma has a very long memory, and it usually arrives in a black carriage. What do you think? Was Silas right to hide the truth about her father to protect her feelings? Or should he have been honest from the start? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and sweet revenge, please hit that like button, share this with a friend who needs a win, and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories every week. Thanks for watching.